Hey everybody, Logan Alex, CPA here from Choice Tax Relief. I'm just sitting in my car here on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon waiting to pick up one of my kids from school. And I thought I would share some thoughts on how yesterday's election is going to impact your taxes. Obviously, we know Donald Trump was reelected. Apart from something crazy happening, he will become the 47th president of the United States. We know that the Republicans regain control of the Senate. So starting next year, there will be a Senate Republican majority. The House is still up for grabs. Currently, the Republicans hold the House, but the Democrats could flip that. So that's kind of up in the air. But just my quick thoughts here. A, is the income tax going away? No. Trump, he says a lot of things. And he kind of has been talking recently about eliminating the income tax and replacing it all with tariffs. Folks, that's just not going to happen. He does not have the unilateral authority to do that. That would take Congress to be on board with that. And I don't really see that happening, even if Republicans keep control of the House. That is just too drastic a shift in how our country works to really have a snowball's chance in heck of coming to pass. So you can kind of scratch that. Second thing, IRS enforcement. Obviously, the Biden administration, its first major legislative work was the Inflation Reduction Act, which gave the IRS a bunch of new funding. Will that change under Trump? I think that will be rolled back significantly if Republicans keep control of the House, because then we'd have a Republican in the White House. We'd have, and both houses of Congress controlled by Republicans, right? So that is something to keep in mind. What does that mean if you owe tax debt? It means that the IRS is just going to get more and more frustrating to work with. Folks, IRS is already frustrating enough. Some of our clients have revenue officers assigned, and, my staff will leave message after message, week after week, for the revenue officer, for their manager. Hey, just reach out to us. We want to talk to you about, our mutual case here and reach some kind of deal, some kind of resolution for our client. And we don't get responses for weeks, and I don't know if that's because folks are just new at the IRS or they just have too many cases on their plate. But I do think if that IRS funding is rolled back, it will make the IRS even more frustrating to work with. And they make it even more aggressive because they have to make up that funding somehow, right? If they're losing funding from the government, they're going to want to pursue, more money, right, to convince Congress to maybe give them some of that funding back. So that's just my opinion. How about your tax return, your tax bill for tax returns going forward? So many of you know that Donald Trump, one of his first major bills, one of his first major acts that he signed as president was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was passed in December 2017, took effect largely for tax year 2018. Now, this thing was probably the biggest change, made the biggest changes to our tax code since probably the Tax Reform Act of '86 under Reagan. It did a lot of things. It doubled the child tax credit from $1,000 to $2,000, also made way more people eligible for it based on their income. It created this new credit called the Credit for Other Dependents, a $500 credit. It lowered income tax rates for individuals pretty much across the board. It doubled the standard deduction, almost doubled the standard deduction, right? And a lot of those things helped taxpayers across the board, right? The wealthy, in addition to the everyday American, okay? The everyday American worker. My opinion is that those popular tax cuts that kind of help everybody, right? Rich and poor, rich and middle class, right? Or wherever you are on that spectrum. I think that even if Democrats take the House, those are going to stick around, right? The Biden administration, one of its big things was, hey, we're not going to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400K, right? $400,000 a year, which is a lot of money. And I think it'd be political suicide for any Democrat to want to get rid of those everyday American friendly aspects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, if they want a shot at keeping their seat in the 2026 midterms. Okay, so I don't think we're going to see those things going away. Things that I think might be going away, well, the thing I think that will probably be going away is the $10,000 SALT limit. SALT stands for state and local tax deduction. This is an itemized deduction for the property taxes you pay and the state income taxes you pay, right? The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act limited that to $10,000. This has been pretty unpopular, and it's even grown more and more unpopular among, in red states as well, given how crazy real estate prices have gotten since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed, right? In most states, higher, property values mean higher property taxes. So this $10,000 SALT cap, which at the time it was passed, largely affected homeowners in blue states, California, New York, right? Places where the homes are very expensive. Now it's, the average price of a home in, some deeply red states is pretty astronomical compared to what it was in 2017 when this was passed. Another thing to consider about this is the House, right? The House is it goes back and forth between Democrats and Republicans, just like any other, just like the Senate, just like the White House. But some of the most hotly contested seats in the House right now are, places red, let's say districts that have been historically red in blue states, right? Pockets in California here, for instance, which is obviously a blue state, but we have some congressional districts here that have historically been very red, but then kind of flipped blue, either, they flipped blue, let's say in 2018 or 2020 or 2022. Now, they flip back red, and they're just ping-ponging back and forth, right? I think it'd be smart if, that on the Republican agenda was repeal of the SALT cap that is affecting both red and blue voters in these blue states, these expensive blue states. Another thing is Trump is, I believe he mentioned on Truth Social, he kind of hinted at Truth Social a couple months ago that he wants to repeal the SALT cap. Whether that's going to happen or not, I don't know. I think it's more likely than not. Another kind of related thing is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act essentially reduced the mortgage interest limitation, the mortgage interest deduction for homes bought after it was passed. Used to be you could deduct your mortgage interest on up to $1 million of mortgage debt. Now it's only up to $750,000 thanks to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Again, mostly targeting, owners of expensive or buyers of expensive homes in blue states. For my same reasons, I think the SALT cap will likely be repealed. I think they might tweak this one a little bit too, but I feel less strongly about this one than the SALT cap. So I think those things, those are my thoughts on kind of the major individual provisions. In terms of the aspects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that affect the rich, right? The first one is, the slash of the corporate income tax rates. Now, these other provisions that I just talked about, those are set to expire on December 31st, 2025, right? And I'm thinking that most of them will be extended except maybe the SALT cap. Now, this slash of the corporate tax rates, that is not sunsetting in 2025. That was essentially a permanent change. Corporate tax brackets used to be, there's brackets up to the 30, upper 30%. Trump lowered that all down to 21%. I don't think they're going to budge on that. Trump's even talked about getting that down to 15%. I don't know if that'll happen, but I really don't think they're going to, be rolling this back, especially because it's not a sunsetting provision. Sunsetting provision means one that had an expiration date. Now, one of the tax cuts for the rich that does have that December 31st, 2025 expiration date is the near doubling of the lifetime gift and estate tax exclusion. So, if a rich person dies, it used to be, before Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, anything above about $5 million would be subject to the estate tax, right? Less their lifetime taxable gifts. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act essentially doubled that to around $11 million, and it's adjusted for inflation every year. And that's per person, right? So for a married couple, that's $22 million. Yeah, so that's a lot of wealth. that can be passed down tax-free. I mean, of course, opponents of the estate tax say, well, they already paid income tax on it. Why do they have to pay tax on it again just for their heirs to inherit it? That's something for the, you know, the tax brainiacs to discuss. I'm just here reporting the facts. You know, between that and between the reduction of the corporate tax rate, which are kind of the two big provisions that, you know, benefit the rich, which is the big complaint about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, I think maybe the Republicans would be a little more open to kind of throttling that estate tax exclusion. Is it likely? I don't really think so, especially if Republicans keep control of the House. But if the Democrats take control of the House kind of as a concession to get something through in order to extend the other provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which are slated to end at the end of 2025, I think they might have to throw the Dems a bone and maybe throttle that a bit just to get more popular support going into the 2026 midterm. So those are my thoughts. There's also the QBI deduction, the 199A deduction. This is a 20% deduction on net income, basically for small business owners. I love the thought of it, and it works fine for business owners with a very simple situation. It's just who don't, you know, aren't making gobs of money. It's just, you know, 20% of your net income. But you know, it can get complicated in some situations. I think it turned out to be a little more complicated than maybe the Congress intended, the application of it. So, you know, I'd love for that to be simplified in a way that nevertheless still doesn't negatively impact those who benefited from originally, or even completely replaced with something else for business owners. Don't know what that would be, but the 199A thing has kind of it's kind of created a headache for tax preparers. And tax professionals. Let's just say that. Anyway, folks, those are my quick thoughts. You know, I've only been kind of been mulling on this for the past, you know, few hours here and there. I just want to share them with you. If you disagree, if you agree, please let me know in the comments. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot more about what the Republican agenda is going to look like going into next year here in the near future. And obviously a lot hinges on whether or not Republicans keep the House or if Dems manage to flip it. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I'm Logan Alec from Choice Tax Relief. I have some other videos on taxes here on the side of the screen somewhere. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.